Yes, this is Parisha of Consciousness Unlimited, and we're at the 21st UFO event here in Phoenix, Arizona. Chuck Zukowski, we've got a little joke going here on his Chuck's name, is my guest right now, and Chuck is going to talk to us. And first off, I want you to give some background of yourself, Chuck, and what you have actually, why you're here and what you're talking about. We want you to actually realize there's a lot of different perspectives on what we're here exploring as UFOs, and that Chuck's particular experience is dealing with some real traumatic situations around all this. So I feel what Chuck has to offer is a must to anyone who's exploring this field. So basically, that was my interest in making sure he's one of the people we talk to while we're here. Chuck, as we're talking because of how we're filming this, talk to me and look at me in there, not over here. Okay?
Oh, very good.
So yeah, so just look at right over there and see the better side of that reflection.
All right.
Fantastic. Now, Chuck, give us some background on you. Tell us where.
Well, obviously, my name is Chuck Zukowski. No, my name is Chuck Zukowski, and I'm an independent field investigator. Have been for over 26 years, 25, 26 years. I designed microchips for about the same amount of time. So I'm very into the high-tech part of technology, of what we would assume is our technology flying around and what's not our technology. So it's kind of an advantage that I have, especially when I've been involved in spy satellite technology, deep space probes and stuff in the microchip industry. As a field investigator, I've been able to investigate different types of ufology genre, if you will, from abductions to Roswell to Bigfoot to ghosts and to cattle mutilations. And so here at the 2012 Congress, my lecture is on cattle mutilations. 2 years ago was actually on Roswell, but cattle mutilations are very interesting. Uh, Investigation by itself. It's one of the few, actually the only investigation that I've done that has to do with ufology where it involves a living entity that was dead, meaning a living animal. If it be cow, horse, dog, goat, sheep, that was alive 24 hours prior to me investigating it. Now I'm there looking at it, a dead carcass. So here's a living life form that is now deceased due to some unusual phenomenon that we can't explain. So it's kind of traumatic, obviously, because you're not dealing with older investigations. You're looking for evidence. Here's the evidence right here. The problem is what type of evidence are we looking for? Now, mutilation cases, and they've been going on, well, at least here in the United States. The very first case that really went public was in 1967, and it was Snippy the horse, which was actually later the horse, and it was in the Alamosa area of San Luis Valley. But to date, since 1967, there's been a report of over 10,000 animal mutilation cases alone here in the United States.
Wow,
so much so that since 1967, no one's been caught, no one's been convicted, no one's been sent to jail for doing these heinous crimes. And they are. It's animal cruelty. In the state of Colorado, if you are accused of doing multiple animal cruelty acts, it becomes a felony. So, the court systems find it, very serious. Humane Society has actually numerous times set out rewards trying to find the culprit or culprits that are responsible for doing these types of mutilations or incisions, killing these animals.
Wow.
So it's very, very important. Now, how does this tie into ufology? Well, first off, it's a phenomenon by itself. So it's basically a paranormal event by definition, meaning it's not of what we consider normal events that occur, at least in this society at this time. So what makes a mutilation is, regardless if it's a cow, horse, sheep, dog, is you find an animal that has, first off, there's no evidence of how the animal was killed, especially with a cow or horse. You don't see any evidence of a mountain lion or a bear attack. You don't see the markings. You don't see the scratches, the bites. You don't see any of that. And if anybody out there is watching this has ever watched National Geographic, when you see the animals in the wild in Africa and all the other places, you know what it looks like when an animal takes something. Yeah. You don't see that here. Not only that, you don't see any evidence that the animal actually struggled. meaning for all the skeptics and debunkers out there, excuse me, that think that maybe the animal struggled a little bit before it died. All these cases is basically the animal is just laying there. There's no movement at all in the legs at all, so it's as if the animal had been placed at that location. Excuse me. This is a really, really important topic, and there's a lot of people that are interested in this, so I've been talking a lot lately in the past 3 days, so I apologize if I have a little bit of laryngitis. And I was more impressed with the amount of people's concerns when it comes to animals, because it's very dear to them, living things, especially horses. I apologize. So anyway, you have these large animals that have been killed with absolutely no trace of how they've been killed. Not only that, there's no evidence of a lot of blood loss. There's absolutely no evidence of how it even got to the location it's at. Mm-hmm. Meaning what we think is an animal would be over here, and somehow or another it was taken to another location, some strange and unusual incisions, and for whatever purpose, whoever did it, we have no idea why and why they needed certain parts. We have some theories I can talk about. But anyway, they do the incisions over here surgically, and then they put the animal back in the general area. They do all that by leaving absolutely no evidence that we can find on a conventional frame of mind. So as an investigator, that's what makes it paranormal.
Can I bring some questions out just to make sure that our listeners who are hearing this for the first time? So, real clearly, we're not dealing with the carcass of whatever animal in form that looks like it's been radiated and maybe killed through radiation. We're not talking about that, are we?
No, we're not. Really.
And we're talking about incisions. And when you say incisions, are we talking about clean incisions, not like just some butcher situation, but a clean, what you would consider very done by expert?
Absolutely, and I can show. That's a very good question. I don't want to go in too close because some of these are very graphic pictures.
Let's just make sure the light's there.
There you
right
go.
There.
Okay.
That's very good.
And that one kind of shows me using a Geiger counter. And what I do is every one of my investigations, I do look for trace elements of radiation.
Yeah.
Very first thing as an investigator, what we try to do is obviously, we want to do the investigation and keep ourselves safe. As for incisions, we get all kinds of really interesting incisions. Let me see if I can find a picture that's not as graphic. I know this one is a little bit graphic, but you see some incisions. There we go. And this is the side of the cow's head, and you can see that pretty much that gaping incision or hole in the side of his head. This one went right into the cranial nasal area of the animal. So we get some really unusual cuts and incisions with these animals, and you're not really supposed to see those incisions in those areas if it's predator or if it's scavenger, because that's not where the meat is. If if a scavenger is going to take me down, what happens is we hold a lot of our fat in the anal area. We all have. Well, I don't know. We all have, but I have a big butt.
I'm not going to comment on that.
So you're going to get someone come in, a scavenger or even a predator first, and that's the meat.
For the meat.
That's for the meat. But there's no meat here in the side of the cheek. There's no meat here in the side of the eye that takes part of the nose off. There's absolutely nothing. I mean, it's nothing that really can sustain life for a long period of time, unless you're into jerky, I guess. And that's about all you can get.
Are there parts, just a minute here now, you're going really good with this on me, but are there parts like the one you just showed us where there is this gaping hole? Has there any part of the brain been taken out? Has the ear canal been removed? I mean, are there parts missing from this carcass now that maybe
That's
they took
a very
with
good
them?
point. What we think is, based on my previous investigations, and I've actually found some clear evidence that there's possibly a electronic probe, in those areas. So my latest theory is, based on actual evidence I found, that the hole in the side of the head, there was possibly a probe in there implanted that was taken out, and that's why you had the big hole in the side of the head. And how I found that out is I was using a tri-field EMF meter, or an electromagnetic field meter, same thing that ghost hunters would use, ghost investigators would use on TV, and I found high levels of electromagnetic field. The Earth is 50 microteslas. I was measuring 100 microteslas from this hole. And eventually, that energy would dissipate, but because I was at that animal within less than 30 hours, whatever electronic device was in that head had still left a signature of its electronics, somewhere within the muscle tissue and the skin tissue, but over a period of time it would just dissipate. Now, we've learned that from doing UFO investigations. If we have evidence that a craft came down and actually touched, we use EMF meters along the soil or the vegetation, and we can pick up higher levels of electromagnetic fields where something electronic came down. And so we can kind of pinpoint certain areas. We've been doing that for years. So I'm using this technology now on the animals, and we're finding out that, in fact, it appears that some animals, now this is out of all the animals I've done so far, this is the only case where I've actually found at high levels that there was possibly electronic probe. If you talk to abductees, they talk about implants all the time, so this would be an animal implant. And so what I think is they're going in to these certain areas and that they're pulling something out.
Yeah.
That's why they cut.
That's what it looked like.
And then as for the other holes, I mean, sometimes it's the anal area is cored out, or where the udder was is cored out. The case I had, there was a big hole right here. So for whatever reason, they went in, and now they have access to the lungs and the hearts, but it's still there. The organs are still there. So the best we can do at this point, and I tell you, the problem is analysis, is trying to get the animal either to have a field necropsy done or in-house lab necropsy done for complete analysis. And that's how we try to approach these things. That's just it. How do you approach these things? So I work with Colorado State University, and I do have a couple of vets in the San Luis Valley and up in the northern part of Colorado that would come out and do field necropsies. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to get an animal into an enclosed lab within a certain period of time before a lot of before it decomposes too much.
Parasites.
Exactly, where we can actually get as much information of the cause of this death of this animal as quickly as possible. The problem is getting the information out to the ranchers, and I mean, who do the ranchers call?
Yeah.
And when they have a case like this, these are all free grazing animals, so the animal may actually, the rancher may not even know the animal's dead until 24 hours later.
Right.
When they come up to check on the animals every day, in some cases every other day. So the animal may be dead for 24 hours. Then you have that as soon as the animal dies, you have the clock ticking, obviously, and for every hour we're losing less and less amount of information that we can analyze. Right, so we're losing that. So we try to get there as quickly as possible. So the main thing is to get the information out. So the ranchers know who to call, law enforcement knows who to call when the ranchers call them, and then we have the soil analysis lab set up, we have the veterinary lab set up, we have all that already in place, so when we get an animal, we know where we can send the samples, or we can take the whole animal, or where we can send the soil samples and have soil analysis done on it. And all that's in place now, so it's in a matter of just getting the information out and getting to the animal as quickly as possible. So at this point, I've only been able to send samples back and not the whole animal just because of the time frame. When you start working with certain labs, well, I shouldn't say labs, when you start working with very professional labs, you ask them what their criteria is, and they'll tell you exactly what they need and what their instruments can do and can't do. You just can't take samples and just expect them to figure it out. They have to tell you how to take the samples, how to preserve the samples. So all that's, this is 3-4 years in the working, and we finally got it nailed. So, and I've sent samples, and I've actually drove samples up to them, and I've sent samples into soil analysis. So we're starting to get a database, and we're starting to find some unusual things now. When you start doing enough of these, you start to see commonalities, you start to see trends.